Hi. Now, you might be asked the question of what do you like to read in your free time? And for a proper response, here's an illustration. Well, in my free time, I really enjoy reading novels, English novels. I'm very interested in novels by Charles Dickens, by Mark Twain. Ernest Hemingway is one of my favorites, especially his novel Old Man and the Sea. Agatha Christie is always one of the best, and I really enjoy reading Edgar Allan Poe, although he might be on the dark side and his telltale heart might be a bit too difficult to digest for most people. However, I also do read poetry. I read both English poetry, French poetry, and occasionally I'm also very interested in reading Persian poetry. Now, since I was born in Iran, I'm very interested in Persian poets such as Ferdowsi, Hafez, and Sadi, and especially Maulana, who is a very well acclaimed and well known poet, not only in Iran but also in Turkey, where his tomb lies in the western city of Konya, and has had a very interesting life. He is not only a poet, but he is also a dervish, or a person who believes in Sufism and practices Sufism, a mystic Islamic scholar. Also in my free time, I enjoy reading biographies of famous politicians, leaders, poets, writers. And also I really enjoy reading textbooks on my field of study, which is psychology, education, teaching methodology, as well as sociology. Also, I'm very interested in reading the newspaper. When I usually buy the paper, I go to the headlines, to the political news, or I sometimes browse the business report or the sports news. And sometimes I go to the editorials, or skim through the classified section, and sometimes I would go to the personals. Well, not as a habit, but it helps to know what's going on in the city. And of course, I think reading is very important. It's very important in the sense that it gives you a chance to explore the ideas of people. I think nowadays we are too consumed with watching TV and surfing the net, both being increasingly passive activities that do not engage the mind in any way. I think reading is very important because it's not a passive activity. It's very active indeed. It is very demanding, and it is a very fruitful experience. I mean, through reading, the mind expands in miraculous ways. And I think we should encourage our children to read more often rather than waste their time in front of the telly or surfing on the net and Facebooking, because I think that kind of browsing only makes the mind lazy rather than engage the mind in any meaningful experience. So in short, I believe reading is very important, and I think everyone should have that privilege to read. However, to answer the last question, if I can tell you a story of a book or a novel or a short story that I have read recently, yes, I did read the story of The Pearl by John Steinbeck. The story is about a Mexican fisherman whose child was poisoned and was too poor to support his child for medical expenses because the Spaniard doctor refused to treat his child. So he finds himself in a very awkward and difficult situation and goes to the ocean to find a pearl, so he would actually be able to sell that pearl to have the money to treat his child. However, it is quite ironic that he does find the pearl, but the pearl is so big and so shiny and so beautiful that he ends up that the pearl ends up changing him, because at the beginning he refuses to sell the pearl at a cheap price, of course, but then realizes that he wants to sell it at a very expensive price. But slowly the pearl begins to bring out the worst in his character. He ends up beating the wife that he loves so much, killing an old man near the beach, and running away from the city that he loved so much. by the hunters who wanted to chase and kill him. At the end of the story, while the hunters were resting at night near the valley, he comes out of the cave where he was hiding and tries to kill the three hunters. And while they were struggling, he ends up killing all three, but one of them fires the gun, and the bullet just flies to the air. And then suddenly he hears a scream of his wife. He runs up, worried for the worst, and ends up finding not his wife, but his beloved child, dead in her arms. At that moment, he takes out the pearl and throws it away. The moral of this story is that sometimes the most precious can bring about the worst in all of us.